Welcome to Continuous Recon with BBOT server. All right, so just a quick overview of what this talk is about. It's going to be a sneak peek at BBOT server, which is a new tool written by myself at Black Lantern Security, and basically going to talk about how it's designed to complement BBOT, which is a scanner, and how to basically combine them. So lots of demos, and don't worry if you haven't heard of BBOT or you've never used it before. But out of curiosity, how many people have used BBOT? We got a few. Okay, cool. So who am I? So my name's Joel. My handle is the Tech Revancer. Basically, there's just one thing you need to know about me, which is that I like to build things. When I was a kid, I loved Legos. Now I love Python, and they're the same thing to me. So this is me when I was 6 years old, a little Lego creation. So yeah, I work for Black Lantern. We like to write tools, so we've written a few tools like Trevor Spray, BBOT, and now BBOT server. So a quick background on BBOT. BBOT is a recursive scanner, and this is one of the things that sets it apart from other tools that are designed to basically scan an attack surface. It's inspired by Spiderfoot also being recursive, but it's designed very much to be geared towards pen testers and able to scan multiple targets and at bigger scale. Free and open source, written in Python. We released it about 3 years ago. Actually, announced it at the first hack Redcon. So, and since then, we've been constantly adding new features. We have all kinds of modules. I think we're up to like 120 modules or so. So to explain how BBOT works, I kind of want to compare it to the traditional workflow of like what you're doing as a pen tester or as a bug bounty hunter to gather as much data about a target as you can. So here's a standard workflow. For a lot of you guys, it probably looks pretty familiar. Basically, you start with some targets, you put them into some subdomain enumeration tools like a mass, right? Once you have the subdomains, you put those into a port scanner, put the open ports into a web tool like HTTPX, and then put the URLs into something like nuclei. So you have a very sort of linear workflow, and very simple, makes a lot of sense, right? But this is not how BBOT works. So importantly, BBOT is recursive, and each of its modules, which it has 100 or so, they each take in a certain type of data and use that data to discover something else and then emit a different type. So this example here, just with 3 modules, kind of illustrates a simple scenario of where enabling multiple modules allows them to work together recursively. So we have 3 modules. We have SSL cert, Nmap, and HTTP. And we have color-coded red is open ports and blue is hosts. So as the example goes, you have a target, evilcorp.com, it's a host, it goes into Nmap, Nmap port scans it, finds open ports, and takes those those open ports go into SSL cert extracts host names from the SSL certificate, HTTP extracts host names from the web response, which go back into Nmap, which generate more open ports, which generate more hosts, open ports, hosts, and so on and so on and so on. So you get this recursion going on, and this is what makes BBOT unique and what enables it to find more than any other tool. So here we have a basic comparison of BBOT against Trickist, which I don't know if any of you have heard of Trickist, but basically it's a workflow that combines a whole bunch of different tools. So this Trickist workflow combined like 6 different subdomain enumeration tools, including a mass, and sort of just sort unique all of the subdomains. BBOT was able to find quite a bit more. This was Dell.com, which is a pretty big target, in the realm of like 20,000 subdomains. And typically, the bigger the target, the bigger the gap is. Basically, the more BBOT is able to find. But you can look at PayPal.com, similar results. BBOT found more than twice as much, just thanks to its recursion. And BBOT also, it does more than just subdomain enumeration. So we also have port scanning and HTTPX and nuclei, a web spider, all of this built into BBOT. And all of those things benefit from that recursion, where they can all sort of feed into each other and discover big chains that would take a human a long time to basically track down. Okay, so just to illustrate the recursion, so we have terminal on the right, visualization on the left, and this is just a very simple scan. This was one of the first scans I ever ran with BBOT. It's just a recursive DNS resolution. No crazy modules. It's just resolving Tesla.com recursively. And that's basically the gist of it. You can sort of think of it as a tool, like it's, it does DNS resolution, and then anything else that you plug into that, it just feeds into it. So I did a talk for a little while that showed off some of the crazy bugs that we had when we first started building BBOT, because of course recursion is dangerous, and we had some very intense and embarrassing bugs that happened with recursion. This is one with a DNS wildcard, where it's recursively brute forcing a wildcard domain and will never ever stop unless you cancel it. So yeah, we had things like this, but we spent a lot of time tuning it. It got a lot of testing, because at Black Lantern we do pen testing, so it's under constant use, and there are some people like my boss, Mike, who likes to submit bug reports every day, and he breaks it in ways I couldn't imagine. So thanks to him. So unit tests. Okay, so unit tests is how we ended up fixing all this. Basically, every time we ran into a bug, especially a bug with recursion, we'd make sure to write a test for it so that once we fix it, it never comes back. And of course, as unit tests work, anytime you push code, all your tests have to pass or you merge. So that's kind of how we maintain stability despite that recursive system that can be so unstable. So here's another kind of just a fun graphic of BBOT spidering the Linux kernel documentation. It's kind of what a web spider looks like. Kind of neat. We also had some runaway web spider situations, which caused some havoc for us. But yeah, we got that under control, thankfully. So anyway, that's sort of overview of BBOT. We still use BBOT every day on pen tests. We use it for attack surface management as our main scanner. But BBOT being only the scanner, basically only the collector of the data, one of the biggest questions that we asked, or that we kept getting asked, was, well, first of all, where do I store the data? Can I put it in a database, right? But second of all was how do I diff scans? People would always ask this. How do I take one scan from a week ago and diff it against the scan I ran today and see the difference? And it always gave me a headache. I hate when people ask this, because it's such a simple question. You should be able to do it, right? But it's not as easy as it sounds. Because you got to take into consideration a lot of things. If it's just subdomains, it's easy. But once you start introducing URLs and open ports, vulnerabilities, all that stuff, DNS records, you start to see how deep the data goes, and diffing that can be a real challenge. So let's say you're a bug bounty hunter, and one week you run a scan against a big target. The next week you run the same scan again. You want to know what's changed. So what new subdomains are there? What new open ports are there? What technologies? Which hosts had DNS records that changed? And are there any changes in WAFs or cloud providers? So stuff like this is very interesting for a bug bounty hunter, because if you find a site that suddenly goes from having a WAF to having no WAF, you can start running some tools against that you wouldn't normally be able to run. And if you're the first one to it, there's a good chance you might find something. So this is why we made BBOT Server. BBOT Server is a work in progress, so this is kind of an early sneak peek, like I said. It is not officially announced yet, but it is public on our GitHub, so you can test it out. Features are about 80%, so a lot of the features are built out. Documentation is less. We have a nice README, but we don't have a full GitHub pages documentation yet, which we're working towards. Yeah, I'll link at the end, by the way, to our GitHub. But yeah, so what is BBOT Server? Well, In a nutshell, it's a persistent database for scan data. So we use MongoDB. It stores all your past scan events, keeps a detailed record of each asset's history, each change to the asset. Allows you to create targets, presets, and launch scans through the server and have agents on remote systems executing multiple scans simultaneously. Lots of neat features, which I'll go through in demo. It's also a REST API, so we use Fast API, and it's Open API compatible. So of course, you can use curl or your own scripting, however you want to interact with it. We have a CLI, which is a multi-user CLI that in the background uses that REST API. So you can spin up BBOT server in the cloud and have multiple people running scans or querying at the same time using the CLI. Okay, so I'm kind of a technical person, so I'm just going to get into the nitty-gritty of how to use it. So right now, the steps, and by the way, these steps will be simpler later once we make it a little more user-friendly, but it's still pretty easy. Basically, you just clone the repo, pipex install it, and bbctl is the command you use. So bbctl is going to be the command you use to start and stop the server, create targets, query the assets, basically do everything. It has subcommands, subcommands, subcommands. bbctl server start, we'll fire it up, uses Docker Compose. This is what it looks like. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so ingesting scan data. So if you have a BBOT scan, and by the way, you must use BBOT 3.0. This is the new version of BBOT. All the instructions are in the README on the GitHub on how to install that. But basically, you run a scan, and ingesting the data in BBOT server is just as easy as catting the output file and just piping into the event ingest command. And when you do that, you'll basically get a little progress output that shows you how many have been ingested so far. Yes, looks like that. Like I mentioned too, you can also start scans through the server itself, which will use an agent. It will basically dispatch the scan out to the agent to run on that system. By default, the Docker Compose has a built-in agent, so it'll just run from the same system. But if you forget to do that, you can always ingest it later. So, okay, so just some quick demos of how you can interact with the data once it's in BBOT server. Of course, there is a REST API, like I mentioned, and a database, so if you want to query those directly, you absolutely can. It's very simple layout, basically JSON objects. But if you want to do it in the CLI, you can do stuff like bbctl asset list. You can sort or filter by target, domain. Basically, we're going to add lots of advanced querying functionality as well. But yeah, that's how you list assets. That's, pretty simple, right? You can also list the details on an asset. As you ingest scan data, each asset gets very specific details attached to it, such as the technologies, cloud providers, and all that. Very easy to query. Also, statistics are kept for the entire database. So at any point, you can view for example, what the DNS records are, how many A records you have, what the top open ports are, what the most critical findings are, what the top cloud providers are, all this type of stuff. But gives you kind of an interesting lens into your target to see what cloud platforms they like to use and what programming languages they like to use. This one here was PayPal. So you can see the technologies. The top technology they're using is, well, PayPal, as you might imagine. So also easy to export. If you don't like using the terminal, or if you are like a wizard in Excel, you can export it to CSV or JSON pretty easily. And so all of that is one thing. It's pretty basic. BBOT server is a database, and we designed it to be as easy to query as possible. But that's kind of not what makes it unique. So what makes it unique is the diffing, right? So and I don't know of any open source tools that do it to this extent. So this is typically the feature set that BBOT Server provides is very much like I would say like an enterprise feature set in the way that like it organizes the data. But this is free and open source, so it keeps a perfect record of every scan as almost like a time machine, or like all the scan events are preserved exactly how they were when they came in. And then as they come in, they're basically compared to the existing asset database that you have. And that record of changes is recorded as well. So just to demo this, so you can retrieve the history for each individual asset, and you can see exactly when a certain port opened or closed, or a certain DNS link got added or removed, technology, etc. You can also schedule recurring scans. So this is just as simple as literally making a cron job. Once you have a target and a preset in BBOT Server, you can make a cron job that starts to scan once every day, once every week, however you want to do that. And that will basically automatically ingest and allow you to set up alerts and everything for when something changes. So I'll get into that a little later. So, okay, actually I'll get into it right now. All right, so you can monitor all of it. This is kind of fun. I enjoy monitoring because it allows you to see exactly as the scan is happening what is changing. So I'll kind of explain what's happening in this demo. So in the bottom left terminal, we're monitoring the scan events, so like the raw scan data as it comes in. In the bottom right terminal, we're monitoring the activity, in other words, what's changed on the target. And then in the top, we're just starting a BBOT scan. So we can see it starting to come in. So what this typically will look like is on your first scan, you'll have a ton of events coming in as usual. And every single one of those will be generating activities because everything is new, right? So like both the left and the right terminal will just be like going crazy. But when you run the same scan again the next day, you'll get that same big stream of events, but the activity will be much lower. So you'll only see what's changed. And so you might get like less than 10% of the output that you did the first time. But that's just sort of how that diffing works. And the goal here is to allow you not only to monitor like this, but also to set up custom alerts so that you can set a custom criteria that's like, hey, if there's a vulnerability that's higher than like a high, I want you to message me in Discord. Or maybe set up a custom trigger that says, okay, if an open port, if a port opens on this target, I want you to run a script on it. Very useful for bug bounty and that type of stuff. So, okay, so just to take a step back and sort of just look at this idea of continuous recon. It's actually kind of an interesting feeling once you start to see the day-to-day changes on a target. I didn't actually expect this when I wrote the tool, but it was kind of a funny side effect, which is that you kind of get a feel for the personality of your target. And like, I obviously don't mean a person, I mean like a company. But by seeing like exactly what changes day to day, you can get a feel for like what they're working on, what their devs are working on. You can see subdomains get spun up and down, new promotional sites. You can see them adding technologies or experimenting with new cloud providers, all this stuff. And you can see it like literally as it happens. So yeah, it's sort of like you sort of get to see like exactly what direction they're headed in, and also gives you a lot of insight to be able to look exactly where you need to find vulnerabilities. So this little screenshot I have here is from a scan I ran this morning on PayPal.com. Basically, I ran one scan yesterday and then one scan today, and this was one of the diffs that came back, which is one of their subdomains. You can see that they switched it from being behind Cloudflare to being behind Fastly. So this is, if you're a bug bounty hunter, you're just going to immediately see this and fire up nuclei against it, right? You fire your whole arsenal against it, because that's really interesting. But yeah, it's this type of thing you can watch for. And I'll get into some of the upcoming features later. But yeah, this idea of like custom alerts and custom triggers is something we're really looking forward to implementing. Yeah, so okay. So also another kind of fun feature, everything has to have AI, right? You know, it's kind of like a de facto thing now, but we do have a MCP interface built into BBOT server. So basically, the REST API also doubles as an MCP server that allows you to hook up an agentic AI to it. So you can, well, for example, you'll be able to start and stop scans through this if you want to, but also it's useful for just chatting with your data. So you can ask it questions like, hey, like, you know, what scans have I run recently? Like, what are the top open ports? You know, what are the technologies, etc. It does. anyone who's used MCP knows that it doesn't always work perfectly, but it really is interesting, sort of like having to optimize for it, because when you write a REST API for an AI, you really have to actually like be very descriptive with what the endpoints are and how to use them, so that it works well. Basically document it. Imagine that. So yeah, AI, woohoo. Okay, upcoming features. So like I mentioned before, Discord, Slack, Teams notifications, that type of stuff, that's probably one of the highest priorities for us, is getting that hooked up and allowing you to filter on custom criteria so that when something happens on the target, you can immediately get notified. Also, in a similar vein, custom triggers, which allow you to kick off scripts. Better AI integration, so always building out that MCP interface, and just more advanced querying, especially on the command line. So yeah, if this is interesting to you, you know, if you're a bug bounty hunter or pen tester, or you know, if you have a target that you're kind of like tasked with monitoring, this might be useful to you. So yeah, please try it out if you're interested. We love like helping out on our Discord and GitHubs. So if you have like ideas, or if you run into a bug, just let us know. Yeah, we're always happy to work with you on that. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.